Hello there and welcome to another BoBeats synthesizer review, and today we are taking a look at something which I've been meaning to take a look at again for quite some time, and that is the Yamaha Reface CS. You see, I made a video many years ago because this synth has been around for quite some time, and it's actually more popular than you might think. It was actually quite hard to find a unit in stores in Europe, and so I thought it would be really fun to take another look at it and ask the question whether or not it's still relevant in today's day and age, because, you know, time has gone by. There are many new synthesizers out there that might compete with this one, because it has also been one of my go-to beginner recommendations if you're just starting out looking for a great beginner synth. And I think my unboxing skills are still 10 out of 10. They haven't made any changes to it that I know over the years. It's still the same synth that I had a few years back. It's an 8-voice polyphonic digital synthesizer, virtual analog, and it has built-in speakers, and it's also, you can battery power it. I do think it's all plastic, but it's pretty heavy. You could definitely hurt a zombie with it. And on the back you have place for batteries, so it is portable. If we take a look at the design here, you can see that this sits in a sort of a sweet spot between synthesizers for really hardcore users and synthesizers for people wanting something more accessible, because it has speakers, so it's very immediate to use. You don't need to connect anything to it. You can run it off batteries, and it has this very clear what you see is what you get design. So everything is laid out here on the front. In terms of I/O, it's straightforward. We have stereo here, output left and right. We have headphones output. We have an aux input. You have a controller input. And then we have MIDI in and out on this old school plug here. Looks like something you'd use for your mouse and keyboard on a computer back in the day. But basically it gives you dual MIDI on the big DIN MIDI jacks, and then we have USB. And using USB, you can connect the Reface CS to a computer, an iPad, or an iPhone, for example, and use the Sound Mondo app from Yamaha. This lets you save and recall presets as well as downloading presets, because you can't save and recall presets on the synth itself without the app. I remember it sounding a little bit better than that, but let's try and make a good sound, okay? So just a basic sawtooth sound with some chorus and flanger effect added. Now, when it comes to the oscillator section, it's quite straightforward. You have a type selector here that selects the type of oscillator, and then you have texture and mod. And while it might seem like you only have one oscillator at a time to play with, it's not quite true, because for most of the oscillator types you have more than one oscillator to actually play with. So for example, the first oscillator is a sawtooth. And the texture knob adds in a sub-oscillator, so an additional oscillator. And mod will detune the oscillators in order to give it this kind of super saw vibe. And for the second oscillator, which is a pulse wave, we have pulse width And you can modulate it by setting the LFO to oscillator here. It will modulate the mod here. And texture changes the pitch of one of the oscillators. Let's assign the LFO here to the oscillator. I really like how expressive it can get with only these few functions. It's very easy to get a good sounding sound out of it. And the third oscillator type is for creating sync sounds. But I will note that there's a big limitation here when it comes to sync sounds, and that is the fact that you don't have an envelope to pitch, which is something you actually do need in order to get those really classic kind of sync sounds. That's pretty cool. And the fourth oscillator type offers ring modulation with control over the two oscillators' pitches over here. Fifth oscillator type offers FM, so we're going far beyond like virtual analog here, and with the first knob here you are changing basically the amount of frequency modulation, so we're going from sine wave into more saw territory, all the way to something really harsh sounding. But it's all about finding the balance between the modulator pitch here and how much it's modulating the oscillator, the sine wave. Not too shabby. So when it comes to the sound, there's one big plus and one negative. So on the plus side is that it's actually quite easy to make a good sounding synth sound on it, and it has quite a lot of character. But one negative is that it does sound quite mono unless you're using the chorus and flanger effect, which broadens the sound a bit. So if we listen here, no effects, and then we turn on the chorus here. But when you're using something like the delay, you get this very mono sounding sound, which is fine, but I am missing a good like stereo reverb on top of everything that's in here. If they ever make like a Reface CS Mark II, I would love a stereo reverb on it. Now, in terms of its workflow, I will say that it has not aged a day. I still think it's one of the fastest synths to just tweak and get around. Now, I wouldn't really say that there's any like design magic going on here, like on the Mini logo, which I think is a super nicely designed synthesizer. It's just such a great design. Here, it's rather that it's a very straightforward design, not that many functions, and it creates this nice balance where it's easy to operate, quick, intuitive, you don't get overwhelmed, and I think this is why it's still selling, because there aren't that many synths like it on the market. Also worth to note is that there's this little looper here that lets you record a little sequence. It's not something that I personally like, but I know some people who dig it. I also want to note that the envelope generator is a little bit tricksy, so there's this EG here, and you can basically set it so that it either affects the amplitude, the level of the sound. So for example, if we set a long attack like so, we get a more drawn out sound. And if I then push this up a little bit, I also use it to affect the filter. There's also a distortion effect, which sounds, you know, it's not bad for a digital distortion. It's actually quite nice. And besides playing polyphonically, you can also set it mono mode, just playing one note at a time, or you can add in some portamento, glide between different notes. There are some limitations though to be mindful of. For example, you only have one envelope generator that you can assign to either the amp, the filter, or a mix between. You can't use it, for example, to control the pitch, which is a limitation. That's something you can do on a Mini Logue, for example. And for example, the LFO section here is super basic. You can't change the waveform unless you connect it, I think, to like a computer. I think you can do it over MIDI, but I'm not entirely sure. You can't do it from the unit itself, from what I know. So it's a very basic LFO section. So as you can see, the Reface CS is a very immediate, easy to use, easy to get good results out of synthesizer that sound pretty good. It's not the greatest sounding synth, but it has this, I don't know, it has this vibe to it. It's easy to get good results, easy to find a sweet spot on it. So the question remains to be answered, is it still relevant? And the short answer is yes. But not because it's an instrument, and instruments never get irrelevant. I'm sure you'll find comments like that in the comment section. From a consumer perspective, synths are always going to be more or less relevant, depending on a few things, depending on who's buying it, for what reason, what sounds are they after, what is the music style they're working with, what kind of sound is actually popular right now, and most importantly, what other synths are there on the market. So with so many new synths coming out since the Reface CS was first announced, the question is it still relevant in today's market? And with that in mind, the answer is still yes. Let me explain why. So look here, we have speakers, we have a keyboard, small form factor, well built, with knob per functions, no menu, no advanced features, mind you, but it's still super accessible synth with a lot of sweet spots. That sounds pretty good. And when I looked at synths being released since the Reface CS, there are just few synths like this on the market. One synth that came to mind is the Roland S1, small battery-powered synthesizer. That sounds pretty good, but the problem is that it requires you to do a lot of menu diving in order to get some really great results out of it. And it also doesn't have a keyboard, no built-in speakers. Then we have something like the Mini Freak. It's a little snug. It's a great sounding synth. It has a lot of different synth engines. I think it even has a vocoder, and it's just great, but it doesn't have a real keyboard, no built-in speaker. I don't think it's battery powered right, and it requires you to go into menus more, and it's more complex, but also a lot more capable than the Reface CS. However, it's not truly polyphonic. So if you like the idea of having a real keyboard, maybe because you are a better keyboard player than I am, then the Reface CS is still different enough that the Mini Freak won't make a lot of sense. And then we of course have the undisputed king of hands-on synthesizers, the Minilogue XD. But this is a very different tier of synthesizer. So it's still beginner friendly, it's very immediate, but it's far more complex than something like the Reface CS. It's also partly analog, so if you use it on stage, it won't be as reliable, I think, as a Reface CS. And while a large portion of my audience thinks that the Minilogue XD is pretty straightforward and easy to use, I know that to some people it will be difficult to use. And while I recommend the Minilogue XD to more people, because I think it's a synth that will last you a longer time if you're willing to put in the effort to actually learning it, I also think that the Reface CS is probably still the best beginner, like truly beginners friendly synthesizer, because it's knob or fader per function and it's just super accessible, even though I think that a lot of people will keep it for a while and then sell it to get something more advanced if they get really into synths. But if you're like a musician looking for your first synth to kind of dip your toe into the waters of synthesizers, then yeah, then I think that this is a great option. So with all of this being said, do I think that the Reface CS is worth getting? Yes, absolutely. It's a very interesting entry-level synthesizer. So I hope you enjoyed today's video, and as always, hope to see you in the next one.